Probably wondering why a cybersecurity company is at a trucking conference. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm anticipating that the topic of today's discussion was going to garner more attention over the next couple of years. So we're feeling that we're pretty early to this storyline, but I'd like to share with you guys what we know about basically a problem facing the trucking industry right now that's pretty significant. We're calling it, obviously, freight fraud. Matter of fact, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but just last year, they announced National Trucking Fraud Day because the FBI has gotten involved. It's a $800 million a year problem today for the trucking industry alone, and it's growing. Matter of fact, this past year grew by 400%. Now, freight fraud, as you might expect, is probably like any kind of fraud. It's theft. It's, criminals taking money where they shouldn't have taken it. What's interesting about what I'm going to talk about today is the cyber aspects of it. It's increasingly becoming a cyber problem. I was out, we have a booth here, and I've been talking to the people who have coming by, and it dawned on me, listening to them, there's my water. I'm going to get my water. Excuse me just a moment. It dawned on me, thank you, Eric. It dawned on me just talking to people here at the conference that everybody's being targeted. It used to be that common wisdom was that just the large logistics companies, the tech warehouse companies were getting it, the carriers, obviously. But it turns out, as I'm going to show you today, that probably everybody in this room is being targeted. Not necessarily on a daily basis, but pretty regularly. The reason is, what I'm going to talk about as well, is that threat actors are targeting trucking specifically for very specific reasons that are purely opportunistic and because it's inexpensive and it's very profitable. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that. By way of introduction, my name is John Williamson. I'm the Vice President of Sales for a company called SOCRadar. SOCRadar is a threat intelligence company. Our business is we track threat actor activity. We look for signals of breach before they become attacks. And it's kind of a fascinating technology and area. It has a lot to do with some AI components, which I'll talk a little bit about. But suffice to say, because of a partnership that we made recently, about a year ago, I had a conversation with the Chief Information Security Officer at DAT Freight, a woman named Erika, who's a remarkable person. She's energetic. She's visionary, and she and I have really had a chance to enjoy our working together, both at a professional and personal level. And she couldn't make it today. Matter of fact, she would have been a much better speaker than I probably will turn out to be. But I'm gonna handle this one solo. But we've done some things with DAT that are impressive in terms of both their outcomes, but also in the sense that it spans across the whole supply chain, because this is a real supply chain issue. By the way, too, I will say, personal note, I grew up about 2 hours east of here, so kind of coming home. I live in Denver, Colorado today. I've been out there with my family and kids for the last, 25 years. But it's good to be back in this part of the country. So let's first talk about what it is. Oops. How about do that one? There we go. Basically, these are the components: theft and deception. This is a big one. When I mentioned earlier that everybody's impacted by this, that threat actors they are personally targeting you, they're designed to perceive. Basically, what this means is that, and we're going to talk about some use cases here, they're contacting individuals within the trucking industry to imitate what might be a legitimate enterprise. They're using it to exfiltrate what we call their passwords, usernames, bank account numbers, and other things. It's not like that old letter from the Nigerian prince, that we all remember, at least if you're my age, you remember those. But it's much more sophisticated. By using AI today, they're able to imitate otherwise very legitimate sources in ways that were heretofore unreasonably unfathomable and even technology expensive. Now they're doing it for free using ChatGPT and other means. Double brokering, I think most people in this room would understand what that is. Basically, they're accepting a legitimate shipment using a fake profile, and then they're taking the money and then they're reposting the shipment. then the shipment gets picked up again. This is what's primarily resulting in such a huge loss in funding. Double brokering is the primary reason for the $800 million impact of the industry. But they're using technology and cyber techniques in order to perfect it in ways that are really insidious. Fake carrier profiles, spoofed websites. This is an interesting one. Basically, what's happening is they're using AI agents in order to take legitimate companies, and I'll use DAT as an example. So you can take a domain name, and you can essentially, using technology and AI-enabled concepts, you can then register a whole host of imitating domains that look awfully similar to that particular domain. What they're using it then is they're using it to affect the MX records, they're using it in the email headers, they're using it obviously in how they approach individuals to try to get information, but importantly too, they're also using AI to generate these profile envelopes, if you will, to very much mimic similar style, conversationally, similar invoice structure and so forth, to basically mimic and fool people into clicking on things they shouldn't be clicking on. I'm going to save something for a little bit later, which is going to be, I think, particularly interesting to this audience. It's interesting to anybody that hears about it for the first time. But there's an implication of those mouse clicks that's really interesting. It used to be that you thought, now that's going to detonate a payload. You know, I click on this mouse, or I click on this document, I click on this link, I open this. It used to be, well, that means I'm going to get a malware. You know, something's going to happen, it's going to shut my system down, or maybe it shuts the whole system down from a ransomware perspective. But it's actually doing something very different today, which is really fascinating, but it's also driving the rate of fraud in the trucking industry in enormous leaps and bounds. We'll get into that in a little bit, but those are just some of the things that they're doing. I've sprinkled this with a couple of real-world examples. This isn't just late last year, they did a phishing scam, hits a major trucking firm. The fake brokers lure to shipment release and financial losses and delays. It's endemic. Think of it as somebody, you know, showing up to your house. Phishing is essentially like somebody showing up to your house in a UPS truck, dressed in a brown UPS uniform, with a UPS scanner, walking up to your door and getting you to sign into your information. And then they walk away. And it looked and felt that legitimate. That's essentially how the phishing scam worked. What they basically do is then they exfiltrate credentials and other information, and they are able to lock down these systems. It's essentially like going to a warehouse, walking up one day. I don't know if anybody's familiar with ransomware, but it's basically, it's like walking up to a warehouse door and the doors are chained shut, and there's an invoice on the door that says, pay $1 million and we'll take the chains off. It's extremely disruptive to the business. It's extremely expensive to untangle yourself. One of the things that my company does in particular, unfortunately, is ransomware negotiation. It's actually becoming a business. It's like a whole supply chain, or I should say supply and demand, that when people do get in that situation, negotiating with these threat actors is something that is an art in itself. In almost all cases, it's either walk away and lose all of the data and suffer the business disruption and the loss of reputation, or somehow negotiate the payment and get the business back on track. The ransomware threat actors themselves are actually, this is ironic, they're very likely to release the data without any fuss as long as you pay something. And the reason is because that's what keeps their industry going. They know that if they really screw people over and detonate and fully encrypt all this data, never to be retrieved even if you pay, then the next person won't pay. So it's actually become a game of cat and mouse between the threat actors and those that are trying to protect the companies from ransomware. Why are you, I say you, literally but somewhat euphemistically since we're at Matt's, but why are you guys being targeted? For starters, everybody in the supply chain is under a lot of pressure. They're moving very quickly. Things have to happen now. Number two, the systems that you all are using are not only legacy systems, which is obviously one of the big problems facing any SCADA systems, or I should say any public utility systems or other systems have been in use for a long time. But importantly, it's that these legacy systems that you guys are using now are starting to become they're migrating into mobile apps, mobile phones, scanners, credit card acceptance on phones and so forth. So the technology is becoming extremely distributed. What that means is that there's several more doors for a threat actor to knock on. And that's one of the reasons that individuals are being targeted with increasing frequency. And everything's essentially being relied on or for digital means. The thing about this is also it is an endemically a supply chain problem. That means if one piece of the chain is compromised, typically the downstream impact hits a lot of people on the head as the rock rolls downhill. And so the other thing too about this is that it's easy money for threat actors. Because of all these things, and because they know that they can get in, because they know that they can impersonate virtually anybody in the supply chain, there are now threat actor groups that we're tracking very closely. Black Cat is one of them, and Lockbit is the other. These are names of threat actors. As a matter of fact, if you come over to our booth, we have cards. It's actually, it's a deck of threat actor cards, and Lockbit and Black Cat will be in there. But we know they are specifically now mobilizing towards the trucking industry in particular because it's becoming so easy and so profitable. It's one of the reasons that this has become such a big problem is not only are they targeting the industry itself because of the inherent vulnerabilities, but they also know that it's profitable. And it's very, very inexpensive for them to take advantage of it. Excuse me. So basically, ransomware campaigns, credential stuffing, and identity spoofing are the three primary ways they're getting in. I'm going to talk about one in particular. Remember, I promised I was going to tell you about one particularly insidious new variant that they're using. And this is not something designed to scare anybody here. It's just something that also is a reminder to stay extremely vigilant. I tell my kids, I've been in cybersecurity for 25 years, and I tell my kids all the time, if you do not know the person that sent you something that's requiring your activity, if you weren't expecting that from that person in that activity, completely ignore it. It doesn't matter how legitimate it looks. And the reason is because the single biggest, fastest growing form of malware today is something called a stealer log. What a stealer log is, it's completely undetectable by our managed services providers, MSSPs, our endpoint detection systems, our antivirus software, whatever. They don't detect it. These are essentially invisible malware variants because they're changing and evolving so fast that there's no way to patch against them. And the reason is they're also so insidiously dangerous is because they leave no trace. You don't know whether or not you've even clicked on it or not. You'll never know. Except the only way you'll ever know is the day that your credentials show up on a Russian black market on the dark web. It turns out that this malware variant, and what they're expecting, or what they are projecting today, that it's about 40,000 sets of credentials are hitting the black web, or the dark web every single day. And what those are is this malware variant basically comes into your computer very quietly. There's no sign of it. And it immediately starts tracking everything in your browser cache. And that means your credit card numbers, your passwords, your usernames. Importantly, too, it turns out that your browser cache, they use things, your multi-factor authentication, the MFA tokens, are also being logged in that cache. And it turns out that most of the multi-factor authentication systems today, which claim to be reset those tokens, those things that I have something that I'm the only one that knows about it and I'm the only one that can enter it, it turns out that they don't expire as quickly as people actually think they do. Sometimes those tokens are valid for 24, 48, and even as long as a week. So what they do basically does is it sniffs all of this stuff off your browser cache, takes it, exfiltrates it to another server, and then the malware uninstalls itself. So again, you never even knew it happened because you clicked on a link you shouldn't have clicked on, because you opened a document that came from a fraudulent source, because they've impersonated a domain that looks very much like a domain that you are used to getting information from, because the structure and everything looked about the same. What happens is there's now a booming black market for those credentials. An analogy that somebody had taught me early in my cybersecurity career is that threat actors are like ants walking through a rainforest. And the point is they move through this, under the canopy, and they move through this rainforest, and they're completely opportunistic. They're just going to take whatever comes their way. They're not hunting for food. They're not looking for food. They're just adapted to know it and see it and smell it as soon as they get near it. Same thing with threat actors. What they've done today is, so these credentials that they're sucking down all the time every day are going for sale in these Russian black markets. You now go to this, and it's actually called a Russian black market. You can't make that up. You go there, And it's a distinct source that we have used technology in order to be able to monitor 24/7 and 365 days a week, and it's a dark science. But we're able to now find all of the mentions of any domain that happens to have a credential that's been exfiltrated and been made for sale in that black market. It turns out now that these threat actors have learned that they can bundle a whole load of these different, they call them stealer logs. They can bundle a whole horde of them, and they post it on the market. And who would have guessed how much, if I have a horde, let's say I have a couple of thousands of credentials, and I know which companies they came from because identified by the domain name, and I sell them on a black market. Anybody want to guess how much it would cost to buy one? A whole horde. Close, but not, you're way over. $10. They're buying at $10, and you know what they use? Bitcoin. So basically, they use Bitcoin for $10 of Bitcoin. You can buy a horde of these credentials. And so what happens is that people all over the world, in developing countries, there's a huge cyber war going on between Ukraine and Russia. They're trying to kill each other and each other's, disrupt their economies. But even threat actors today are looking for trucking companies' domains in there. They know all of the supply chain. They enter them into the black market, and it comes down and says, here's 4 caches, it's going to cost you $40. And these are going to be made up of perhaps potentially dozens of username, password combinations, and multi-factor authentication tokens for people that work in the industry. And they know that it's easy because they can exploit double brokering and identity theft and impersonation and carrier impersonation. They've got all these techniques. These things face everybody in society. It's not just the trucking industry. That's one of the number one thing that SOCRadar, my company, does is sells. We can set it up so that we can track these things. And if you give us your domain name, we'll tell you the minute one of these goes for sale in a black market. And what you can't do is go take it down. What you can do is we'll just go buy it. And we'll literally convert your cash to Bitcoin, go buy it. We'll at least take the cash off the dark web so you can take a look at what's been had, and then you can quickly make changes, change passwords, lock down a computer, do whatever you need to do. Because there's no saying that won't show up again in another black market very time soon, but we know exactly when the first time it hit that black market, and we can alert you. And that's a big part of what this is about, because it's easy to exploit an industry that you're targeting because it's easy to detonate the malware variant in order to get these things. And it's easy to phish, it's easy to do credential stuffing, but stealer logs in particular are something that's wreaking havoc on the industry. Another case study in Ohio. This is, again, early last year. They were hit by ransomware, 5-day operational freeze, multi-million-dollar losses. This is all certainly the shock and awe. And I can tell you that if anybody does use AI, which I highly encourage you do, it's making a difference in a lot of lives, students included. But go into ChatGPT and put in a good recursive prompt. Go in there and say, I'm in the trucking industry. I'm interested in freight fraud. I'm really interested to know in particular what are some of the more innovative recent approaches that threat actors are using to target industries like mine, or I work for a carrier. I'd like to know how I might be targeted, how our company might be targeted. I'd like to know the different techniques that they're using. And then also, by the way, give me the last 5 examples of it happening, recent examples of it happening. Put that into a ChatGPT prompt, and what will come back will be surprising. I'm almost certain, is how easy it is to exploit and how often it's happening. This is just one example. I'm not going to belabor them other than to tell you should do your homework and go look. Because those are the kinds of things you can also do to help protect yourself and your company by being self-aware of the techniques that they're using and how they're getting it and the impact it's having on the industry. I mean, who's impacted by fraud in the trucking industry? Who's not? Everybody is. It is a fully integrated supply chain made up of many moving parts, all the way down to the individual drivers. We've talked to some drivers today, are here to do essentially their annual buying because they can get really good deals, and a guy says he's going to load his rig with a year's worth of oil, for example. We asked him, have you been subject to any type of ransomware, not ransomware, but any kind of cybersecurity events? He says, of course. He says, but more importantly, it's driving the cost of everything up because everybody's trying to recoup from the losses, and so therefore they have to pass it through, and typically it lands on me. My insurance is going up in particular as well. We're having to get cybersecurity insurance. I mean, there's so many implications for freight fraud. It's why it's such a big issue. It's why we, as an industry, I say we're obviously part of the ecosystem of cybersecurity protection, but we are here because we think it is a real problem that we can help with. That's one of the reasons that we partner with DAT in particular, and why I've been talking with Erika so fervently recently about even applying for some grants that we can help to fund some of the initiatives that are necessary. But I talked about it, the speed of the business. You know, people are moving so quickly. The digital transformation, because it's now all going onto mobile phones and more people have more access to more systems that are being utilized. It's very low cost for the attackers. They know it's a ripe and easy industry to exploit. As I've mentioned before, the access to stealer logs on the dark web is making it even easier because they don't have to try to, we have a saying at SOCRadar, don't hack in, just log in. Go to the dark web, get the credentials you need from the domain, which is representative of the company that you're targeting, and use any of those credentials to log in. What they're really looking for are obviously VIP logins or system administrator logins. And in fact, it's become to the point where the threat actors have figured out that you and me and everybody else is using their personal computers to log into work resources. And so what they're doing now is they are going after, they find out the identities of system admins, CISOs, and VIPs, this be like C-level executives. They find out who they are. Then they go and they use publicly available information, find out their personal email addresses, and then they're detonating stealer log bait on their personal email addresses. And so that's one of the things that we're now looking for is you can feed in personal email addresses into our system. We'll tell you if they've been the subject of a malware incident and if there are any corporate resources that have been exfiltrated from the personal machine because people are using the personal machines to log in. So the whole browser history has got the username, passwords, because people save their passwords, as well as the MFA tokens. So what can you do about it? I am going to move seamlessly, quietly, and very overtly into somewhat of sales mode. I don't mean to sell anybody in this room cyber threat intelligence services, but I do want to tell you about things that are being done, and I think they're important if you want to share them with others, and I think it's because a lot of what we're doing right now is about raising awareness. Essentially, cyber threat intelligence is evolving very quickly. It used to be something of a big enterprise solution. There are companies out there that I won't name. It wouldn't be cool, but there are big companies that have gone through several funding rounds who provide big iron cyber threat intelligence capabilities. They record the future, so to speak. And so one of the areas that we have started to realize is that those big iron solutions have been really big iron price tag expensive. It's expensive to collect so much information that you can vector very quickly on which companies are being targeted, where this information is, what vulnerabilities do they have, how can this be exploited, which threat actors are attacking which industries, where in the parts of the world are certain threat actors most active. All of this is a big collection exercise that heretofore has cost a lot of money. What my company, SOCRadar, has done is we created a free cyber threat intelligence tool that any company, as long as we validated you're not a threat actor, and we do a little bit of checking, you're not a threat actor, any company can start using our threat intelligence platform. And what we do is by giving it away for free, it's a stripped down version of the platform, but we also tell them we're going to give you all the news we have about threat actors in the area. We're going to give you all the information we have about vulnerabilities that are in your vertical. We're going to give you all this information that allows you to maybe do a couple of little threat hunts, like put your domain in and we'll see if it got caught up in one of these stealer log accounts or those kinds of things. We give it away for free in exchange for them then starting to do a lot of threat hunting on the platform, to start sharing information with us. And today we have over 30,000 businesses using our free platform. What that has done is it's brought the cost of acquisition for us significantly down, and it's allowed us to start selling big cyber threat intelligence capabilities to small to mid-sized businesses. It's one of the reasons that we're so interested in the trucking industry is because we think that this is something that should be accessible to a lot of people who are in harm's way. What we do is we look at the dark web exhaustively, but we don't just scan the entire dark web. We go and we look for something very specific, like these stealer log files, like mentions of a VIP, like threats against somebody specific in one of our customers. We also look on the social platforms like Telegram, but we also look for things like impersonated social media accounts on LinkedIn, on Facebook, because those are also points of attack into people like yourselves, particularly on LinkedIn. That's another hot phishing attempt right now, or I should say attempt, but it's being successfully executed, is that they're now mimicking the executive's social media platform on LinkedIn, and then they're sending LinkedIn chats directly from that account. And the only way you can tell the difference is if you look at the URL string and you've memorized your CEO's URL string for his LinkedIn profile, because that's the only way to tell if it's distinctive. Because in particular, mine in particular is, John M. Williamson at LinkedIn, .linkedin.com. If you didn't know that I use John M. Williamson, and if you just got it from John Williamson and the profile looked exactly like me and you got an in-mail via their chat sequence, you'd never know. And so that's another area that we are constantly looking for. And what we do is we call it something called extended threat intelligence, because we don't just take scanning the dark web. We also say, we'll look at your organization's footprint. We're going to look at your vulnerabilities, what technologies you're running, what are the things that are most likely being exploited. Are your SSL certificates up to date? Are they expired? What third-party technologies you're using? Are you using Okta for your login authentication? We take a look at all those things, and then we're able to come back to you on a daily basis and say, you've got vulnerabilities here, you got vulnerabilities here, you need to patch that system. We also tell you if any of your corporate information is found on a dark web source. Another thing that we do is we do something called, brand protection is a lot of the social networking, a lot of the brand impersonations, fake websites. We can actually tell you if somebody's copying word for word content from your website and it's being published somewhere else. Because maybe it's legitimate, maybe you acknowledge it's part of your marketing schema, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a threat actor trying to impersonate you. But another thing we do on the bottom left there, and this is an important one, and this is one of the other things about the trucking industry in particular that's so important, is that you guys are a huge supply chain. We call supply chain intelligence, it's a feature in our system. And if you're a subscriber to our system, you can put in everybody you're doing business with, their URL, and we will alert you the minute we detect that they have a problem. It's not a game of tattletale, it's a game of protection. It's a game of the entire chain becoming more aware and self-aware of its interconnecting interdependencies and connections. So if you've got a carrier, for example, in your network and they get hit with a ransomware attack, we'll tell you, because we're monitoring ransomware shame sites and also picking up news items off of the dark web the minute somebody gets hit with ransomware that gets leaked out, or the minute a threat actor announces that because that's of course the first thing that they do is they tell everybody in the world that they've knocked somebody down. It also tells you if they have employees' information that's found on a black market on the web. Again, somebody may be logging into a system, maybe it's not your company, but it's somebody you share financial information with. So you could get caught up in that exfiltration. Some of the information you need. And then importantly too, it's a shared warning system. It's like a beacon. So if you have people in your supply system, whether they be financially related, trucking related, technology related, warehouse, logistics, anything in the supply chain, you can know if anybody in that chain gets affected. DAT&S, we've done some great work. DAT-free. I want to give them credit. This is a shout out to them in particular, and I wish Erika was here to hear this personally, but I am so happy to have worked with her because they have taken down, we have also, I should have mentioned that, I'm sorry, integrated into our platform are action items. You don't just get some information and say, oh, that's cool. that's fascinating and frightening. We have buttons on our platform that says, hey, we found this stealer log for one of your employees on a dark web black market. Press a button that says, go get it. It literally says, take action. We get it, and we will go and convert your money to Bitcoin. It's all put in a small bank, just like you would in a toll road, and we will go immediately acquire that asset. Or in the case of DAT, what they're doing, which is really good, is they're looking for double brokering schemes and fraud being perpetuated by impersonating domains in their technology. You know, all because obviously they're have a huge visibility into the ecosystem, and they are taking down fraudulent impersonating sites when they see them and when they find them anywhere in the system. And over the last year, they have taken down over 200 impersonating sites alone. It's a 30% reduction in fraudulent load postings, which is an incredible accomplishment, something that we're really proud of, having worked with them on that. And, So freight fraud best practices, there are only two things I'm going to pay attention, I'll focus on here. I mean, those are things like system audits, broker verification, multi-factor authentication. Some of you may be IT administrators in the audience. If you are, you already know those things. For the rest of you, I say that employee training is the most important thing. If nothing else comes from my talk to you all today, it's just remain extremely vigilant. If you weren't expecting it, and if you were expecting it, were you expecting it to be something you clicked on? Was the payload associated with that communication something you expected? If there's any hint of what you would call PII, personally identifiable information, this could be your credit card number, this could be your social security number, this could be an account number, or any kind of financial information. They want a banking number. I don't care if it's the last four of your bank account. Anything smells like it could be something that could be potentially exploited, the answer is always no. You will never get in trouble for saying no. You'll always just have to go do it later. If somebody comes back and says, no, I told you that was something that I was expecting. If it's somebody that you think is in your local sphere of trust, but it just seems a little bit odd. Why are they asking for it this time? But it looks perfectly legitimate. They're using AI to spoof not only the domains, but also the content itself. They will even, you can enter writing samples into AI and ChatGPT, a free service, and says, here are 5 emails that I've been able to steal or intercept from this person. Write an email asking for this information in their voice and using something that maybe only they would say based on these writing samples. I mean, that's how sophisticated it's becoming. So you have to be super careful. So that's my big thing for my message here, is just be super vigilant. You just can't be vigilant enough. If you are inclined to utilize it as a commercial enterprise at a corporate level, there are so many specialized threat intelligence feeds that we have for the trucking and logistics industry because of the work we're doing with that, and then going forward, we can provide that information to you. You can keep abreast of what are these ransomware groups doing, where are they targeting, are there new emergent threats that they're taking advantage of, are there most common vulnerabilities in systems that we need to be aware of that we should be patching. Those are things that we can provide. Real-time monitoring alerts. This is a big one, obviously, as I've said. This is partly about an advanced warning system. The way threat actors are taking advantage of people in this room or the companies you all work for, those that you affiliate with, are simple. Back in the 80s, Lockheed Martin, one of the biggest defense contractors in the world, created what's called the cyber kill chain. Basically, they broke down the anatomy of a hack, how threat actors were actually getting in. And the first 2 stages of the cyber kill chain are called reconnaissance and weaponization. Reconnaissance is, what can I find out about this company? 2, how can I use it against them? And that's really what an advanced warning system does. It looks for all that signal. When they're doing recon and weaponization, that's when you want to become aware of it, not when they're knocking at your door or knocking a system down or have encrypted your information or fooled you into doing something you shouldn't have done. In wrap up, because I think I'm at the end of my time, I'll say this. If there's any analogy that I could use to help maybe make sense of a lot of what we've talked about, if you were talking to somebody in layman's terms about what's happening in the trucking industry right now, I'll use an apt analogy, a highway. Everybody knows that highway. We've been using that highway all along to get from point A to point B and all points in between. Threat actors think of it as this way. They're actually creating new off-ramps. They're creating new signage. They're putting stoplights where they used to not be, but the people using that highway aren't aware of it. They think that somebody is supposed to, that they think this is legitimate changes to the existing transportation ecosystem. And it's not. They're designed to fool people. That's essentially how we talk about it. They're inventing fraudulent exercises in order to commit fraud. And so I think that if this has been anything valuable to you, we have a booth here. Eric's my colleague. We'd love to show you our platform. We can show you what a stealer log looks like. We could show you where we find it on the black market. We can show you how we take them down. We're more than happy to share more of this information with you, but I really hope this has been helpful, and we are dedicated to trying to help knock back what is essentially becoming a 400% growth engine for threat actors in this particular industry. Thank you.